Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Reading, Writing, and Ralph on ZTV Live. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, Election Day. I hope everybody was able to get out to the polls and vote today, or maybe you took advantage of early voting. Something else that today is the second day that our new issue is on newsstands. So please go and pick up your copy. It's chock full of all the good news, including the Nutcracker returning. There's great stories, great restaurant information, all good news about all the good works that's going on in Alexandria. There's a lot of it, and we try to get as much as we can in there. So thanks for everybody for giving us your good news. And if you ever have anything good to tell us, definitely shoot us an email. You can find us on thezebra.org. But tonight is Reading, Writing, and Ralph with our favorite literary editor, Ralph Peluso. Hey, Ralph.
Hi, Susan. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's starting to get a little bit chilly now.
It really is, yeah. It was very cold this morning when I left to go work out, I have to say.
And I tell you the other thing is I really appreciate the new introduction. That was fabulous.
Yeah, that's a nice opening. You've had a lot of, certainly so many guests on this show. How many? You must have done 200 shows, do you think? 150?
Two year and a half, probably about no every other week. So it's probably about 50
Right, right,
in
right.
that.
50, of course. I was
Yeah,
doing my math incorrectly, but still.
I,
Oh,
I've I've done over 200 book reviews.
yes, that's for sure. Excellent.
So anyway, it's been exciting today. No golf yesterday, but I did golf today. So.
Okay, good.
And but yesterday was our big bocce tournament here, and we had a lot of fun with that. And it
Good.
was so another great day, but it was warmer. So
Yeah.
again, bocce season might be coming to a close for a little while.
Oh, well.
But anyway, we have a terrific guest on tonight, Keith Mines, and he wrote a book about nation building
Excellent.
and its importance in the world stage. So let's
Wonderful.
have Keith
Let's
come
bring
on.
him on here. Hi, Keith. Welcome to ZTV Live.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Sure.
Hi, Keith. How are you?
Good, good.
Good. Well, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. And the first thing I always like to do is have the authors uh, give their background to the viewers so they know a little bit about you and where you come from and how you got where you are.
Great. Well, thanks, and thanks for having me on. I know you usually have fun books, and this one might be a little heavier, but I'll try to put a positive spin on what I think has recently become a very heavy and negative subject. I'm actually a big believer in nation building, which is what the book is all about. So, anyway, I got my start in life in Denver, Colorado, and then Kansas City. I did my high school years. Went off to college at Brigham Young University and served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Colombia, which was kind of the beginning of my time in overseas. And I was just intrigued by the whole overseas experience, so came back to college looking for a way to do that full time. Went into the Army for 4 years, worked in Central America and other places in special forces, and then came back for a master's here in DC. So that's how we got settled in the area. Did a master's at Georgetown, and then went off in the foreign service and served in a variety of different jobs there. But I got kind of drawn to this whole question of failed and fragile states, and I think as much as anything, it was just seeing the real loss of human potential when a state doesn't function, when a government doesn't provide the basics of security and opportunity for its people. And it was something that I started to peel away the layers and came to believe that it was all about the question of governance and a little bit less for outsiders, the question of just providing assistance and all of that, some of which is important. But I think if we can help other countries get their governance to a better place, that is often what will really make a difference long term. So we just finished a long career in the State Department, 28 years, and served in all the places that I highlight in the book and some others. So some failed states and some kind of normal states like Canada and Budapest and Hungary, but kept kind of trying to get back to this theme and then had a chance to a sabbatical year to write the book when I was able to embed myself at the U.S. Institute of Peace, where I work now, full time after I left the State Department. But I had a sabbatical year while I was at the State Department to kind of tie together the lessons that I had learned in the course of this career and try to figure out what it was that we had done well in nation building, when it had gone wrong, what had gone wrong, how we do it better. But making the case, that it is something that matters to U.S. national security, to our national interest. And it was kind of weird to write a book and then soon after it came out to have the president himself kind of decry the whole concept as not being misguided. But we can talk about that too.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and we make everything fun. All right, we have to, even though the subject matter may be a little bit heavier than most people think. But let me ask one question and help us clarify it, because you I corresponded over email, and when I think I need you to define for us what nation building is in modern terms, because when I think of nation building, I think of some of the things that went on in the 50s, 60s, 70s, which are, from my sense of it, seem archaic to the new nation building, as opposed to what's happening today. So give us your definition of nation building, and let's start there.
Sure.
What is
So
it?
I would start, with the definition of the nation state. And to me, and in the book, I go all the way back to 1648 when the city states of Europe at the time were coming out of the 30 Years' War, this catastrophic conflict that by some measures killed more Germans proportionally than died in World War II. So this catastrophic conflict, they come out of that and said, this isn't working. And they developed the concept of the nation state. So as I define the nation state, the nation part is this political compact between the citizens of a defined territory that gives them a sense of belonging, blood and belonging, as Michael Ignatieff calls it, of who they are. So the nation is kind of more abstract, but still a defined concept of a political entity. And then the state is what then takes that nation, that nationality or that nationhood, if you will, and gives it meaning in the institutions. So the state is more practical. Do I have running water? Can I open a business? Do I have the rule of law and all sorts of those things? So that to me is the two things that need to go together. And I mean, examples of where one or the other has broken down. Somalia was effectively a nation without state institutions because they all believed that they were Somalis and that meant something to them. But the state institutions, after the fall of Siad Barre in the early 90s, just collapsed the entire government. And they had a hard time getting back to that sense of what is our nation all about and how do we build a government to support it. Yugoslavia was the opposite. So Yugoslavia, again, coming out of the Cold War, was this collection of what should have been and eventually was 7 nation states, but it had been jammed together into a single nation, Yugoslavia, which nobody really identified with. It was an artificial construct. And so as soon as the force that had held them together was lifted, they then, of course, go through a catastrophic civil war, break apart, and become the 7 nation states that they should have been. So, they had state institutions that functioned without a nation. Somalia was the opposite. And then some places, frankly, both of them are frayed. El Salvador, that I worked on a couple times, their concept of nationhood hadn't really cohered. I mean, they were fighting a civil war over what their definition of the nation would be. They all knew they were Salvadorans, but what kind of nation are we going to be? That was still being fought through. And at the same time, they had very weak state institutions. So that was a long process of getting both of those to a good place, fighting through a civil war to decide this is going to be the economic model that we follow, the political model that we follow, and then building the state institutions. And I would say that all of these cases, Afghanistan, Iraq, all the ones that people are so frustrated about today, they're long processes. They take a very long time. There's a lot of ups and downs. But I think we, the United States, would be better served by not seeing this black and white, all or nothing, catastrophic failure, raging success. It's a big gray area, and I think it's hard for us sometimes to to deal with. But I think that we have interests in these different places that require us to be a little bit more patient and certainly better about how we do this.
I, I agree. I want to get to the first trivia question. So, reminder, first person in with the correct answer, type the answer in your comments section, wins an autographed copy of Nation Building by Keith. First question is, what was America's longest war? That should be pretty easy. So let me ask you this. When you look at the American experience and coming out of the colonization of that Great Britain, how different is colonization from nation building, or is there a difference?
Well, let me, a lot of times nation building comes out of the post-colonial period, certainly. So if you look at the post-colonization period, I mean, colonization was just, we're going to come in and we're going to run your nation state for you. And that was, of course, across Africa, Asia, and pieces of Latin America. So that was a form of imposed nation building, if you will. But in the process of that, coming out of the post-colonial period in the 40s and 50s, there was an effort by many of the post-colonial powers to then put into play the kind of administration that would make those nations viable. And so that was kind of a common thing to try to do a sort of nation building. That's a very awkward way to do it, obviously, because they had been colonized and there's a resistance to that. And they needed the space to find their own identity. So that was defined a lot of the wars, of course, across Africa and Asia coming out of that period. America is actually an interesting case, and I'm glad you mentioned our own case, where again, we were colonized by the British, who basically wanted to run the nation for us, of which we had some say, but not a whole lot. We rebel against that and go off in our own direction. But our nation state is actually interesting. And Jill Lepore, a very great analyst on these things, actually calls us a state nation rather than a nation state. All of the nation states of Europe, if you think about it, came out of a national identity that predated their state institutions. And they built a nation state based on being French or Hungarian or Romanian or whatever. Even the ones that came late to the game, like Italy and Germany, there was a coherence of national identity from which they then built state institutions. America was the opposite. We're a state nation. We started our whole national project based on institutions that were unique, not based on the fact that we even shared a common language at the time. German could have been our language. We had a lot of Dutch and French and everything else. So our common identity was the institutions. And as you think about it, actually on a day like today when we just voted, it gives you a sense that our institutions are far more important to our national project and our national identity than even, I think, in much of the rest of the world, where they have something else to keep them together. If our institutions fray, we kind of lose the whole thread, because that's what makes us a nation. It's our state institutions and the fact that we have a unique form of governance and of voting and all the rest. So I would say that there's a real reckless project going on all sides right now to tear down the institutions, and I don't think it's a great idea, frankly. I think we've got to get to a place where we have a commonality of support for the institutions from which we can work through all these problems that we have, or these issues that we have with other larger pieces of our identity.
I think there's a lot of truth to what you said there, and we have a winner already on the first question. So, Susan?
We do have a winner, and I wish I could get credit for calling who was going to be the first winner, but it was indeed Nancy Campbell-Gorski. Congratulations, Nancy. And her guess was the longest war in the United States history, and that was, of course, Afghanistan, which just ended badly. So, congratulations, Nancy.
Congratulations. So let me ask you a question. And one of the things you say in your headlines to the book, everybody hates it. So the very simple question: why?
Well, I one of the things that I would say, and this is something I get into a lot in the book, is that the process of nation building has become very politicized. And frankly, during the Cold War, it wasn't really that way. It was something that we accepted. Actually, throughout our history, it's something that we have accepted that, first of all, in the aftermath of war, there has to be a political consolidation of the state that has just been liberated or has been we have been active in, if you will, kind of a euphemism for invaded or gone to war, whatever. But I mean, there had to be a political consolidation afterwards, and we got very reckless after 9/11. We got this idea that we could knock off a threatening government and then just hope for the best and things would somehow work out. We did that both in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it was a very reckless idea because, again, the process of then getting a government to cohere after a state like that has been, and I'll call it in both cases liberation, because they were really, really under the thumb of really awful regimes. So, but once that has happened, the idea that we could then just leave them alone, and that was kind of the first few years in both countries. It was really tragic because there was opportunities that were missed to help to really get those governments, I think, up and running. So that was kind of a new concept, but that came out of a political environment where, if you remember some of the campaign of 2000, where the military is not going to be used to escort young girls to school or something, was one of the lines that was used in one of the debates. And the idea was that the military is here to fight. We don't do nation building and we don't do peacekeeping. And the other thing that got, I think, way off track was this animosity towards the UN. And it was, again, a very easy political target for reasons I don't fully understand. It played really well in the heartland. There's a little town in Utah. I was just in Utah giving a speech, and somebody reminded me of this, but I remember it when it happened. There's a town that declared itself a UN-free town. So they had a town ordinance that no UN personnel can come to their town. Well, I don't think they would anyway, but it was just a strange thing. But it was, again, this visceral reaction against multinationalism, globalization, or whatever. And then, of course, there were the really dramatic cases like Somalia, where things just went catastrophically wrong. And then the cases like Haiti, which I treat both of those in the book. I have a chapter because I served in both places, but I talked about both of them, and they were very frustrating cases where the UN, I think, was seen as something, negative. So we came into that 2000 campaign with the overhang of this stuff, and I think it was unfortunate because we just resisted some of the things that would have needed to happen to make these cases more successful. And it's unfortunate because we had done it well in the past, and we had administrations that I think really understood the principles better and were able to, again, to have more successful outcomes.
I'm going to get to the second trivia question. And this one's a little bit tougher than the first, and so we'll see who's on their toes. What event marked the beginning of the age of nationalism in Europe? What event marked the beginning of the age of nationalism in Europe? A little bit tougher question. So again, first one in with the correct answer wins a autographed copy of the book. So we've talked about nation building. In your experience, which is the most successful example of nation building that you've seen, and why?
Yeah, so the cases that I treat in the book are Grenada, which was kind of a small intervention followed by an easier case of nation building, if you will. Colombia, which I served in and around 4 times over the course of 20 years. Haiti, and then El Salvador, Somalia, Darfur, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And then I was on the margins of the Balkans because we were posted to Budapest, and I had some responsibility for watching what was going on in the Balkans. I would say the 2 most successful ones were probably Colombia and the Balkans. And one of the problems with success is if something succeeds, you don't focus on it nearly as much as something that fails, particularly if it fails dramatically. So I would say, but Colombia was, this long, talk about a long war. It was a 50-year civil war. It was all the way back to the 60s. And with Plan Colombia, we had bipartisan support, a very, very well-structured assistance program that had a very good mix of soft and hard power. The other thing that's gone, I think, off track is we have this notion now that, well, we're a hard power administration. Well, we're a soft power administration because we like people or whatever. It's just and not a helpful construct. Reagan, I think, was really the best at this, and Clinton did it well as well, where you've got to have a blend of hard and soft power. There's a whole array of tools that can be thrown into these things, and they have to all be working together. And when you cut off certain tools or favor some and disfavor others, it's really a kind of a reckless way to do it. But Colombia, over the course of Plan Colombia, which was a large-scale assistance program to, admittedly, a country that was very switched on and very committed to recovering their country. They had a long-standing insurgency. They were tired of it. They wanted to move on to something where they could recover the territory that was being occupied by the insurgents, by drug traffickers, by paramilitaries, and they were very committed to that. Good leadership. So we were, in that sense, we had a great partner that we don't always have. But it still was a very well structured partnership that we put in a fraction of their effort. They were the ones that paid the price for the most part, but it was some essential components that we brought to the table, and we were very careful about an issue that I deal with a lot in the book of nationalism. That we need to be super careful about not sparking a nationalist reaction in the country that we're trying to help, and that was kind of the big lesson, I think, from Vietnam, and there was threads of that in both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not always easy, but it's something that I think we had forgotten. And the Balkans is another one that I would suggest was a very compelling success. Again, a mix of hard and soft power, knowing how and when to intervene militarily, a very dynamic diplomatic and peace process, negotiations led by Holbrooke, and a very tight coalition with Europe and others. It was a really, I think, a quite a compelling case of success, and then again that helped that country basically break apart peacefully over from the time we got started. I mean, it was obviously a bloody affair up until the U.S. finally got serious about it. But from there, it was a very kind of positive a case where you saw these countries go on to be new nations in Europe and to have a chance.
Right. Very interesting. And we have a winner.
We do. We do have a winner. John Gorski came in with the correct answer. Thank you, John and Nancy. But John's correct answer was the French Revolution, and the event that marked the beginning of the age of nationalism in Europe.
Congratulations, John.
Thank you guys
good.
for watching and playing.
I heard they're building a new library in their house. But let me ask you this one. This is one we had an exchange on email over. So, product of the 60s and 70s. So I moved to Washington D.C. in '76, and a year or two later, massive protests all over the streets. Down with the Shah. And now, the United States, we installed the Shah, right? We'd had a covert operation. And my point of view, based, now reading your book, I looked at that as we were trying to impact that and build that nation. It went radically wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Is it mainly because we probably put the wrong leader in place, but were there other influences there that would have tipped off somebody to say this is going to go sideways? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, initially I dismissed that but as I thought about it, you pushed back and you were absolutely right. And it's a great case, I think, to consider a whole lot of things. I mean, during the Cold War, we of course were all in for a lot of this stuff because we wanted to have strong allies in different places that could resist the Soviets. And Iran was just this critical. You can't get a more critical location, just on the margins of Central Asia, and so it was really a key location, large country, oil. It had a lot of things that we were interested in, obviously. So we're trying to keep them on our side of the ledger in the Cold War, and but it's a great case of how we totally overreached and missed that thing that I just mentioned about nationalism. We just missed that. Now, not
Right.
everybody missed it. I'm friends with one of the Iran hostages. I worked for him twice, Michael Matrinko, and he was a Peace Corps volunteer in Iran, then went back as an embassy officer and spoke great Farsi, and is actually prominently mentioned in Mark Bowden's book, Guests of the Ayatollah, about the prisoners. He was separated out in a whole separate place because his language skills were so good, and he was such a pain in the ass to the captors of the hostages, and he had a whole different wing of the prison or whatever. But anyway, but he knew what was coming. He could see it because he was out with the people, and I think there was reporting that was coming back from those embassy and other officers and journalists that were out in the countryside, and I think they could see what was going on. But it was this classic case where in the cities, women are wearing mini skirts and people are going to discos, and there was all this stuff going on. But it was a real westernization in the cities, and the countryside was alienated by that, and so that's where the Islamists were able to get a foothold that eventually kicked everybody out, and the next thing we know, we've got one of the strongest enemies that we've had. So it was a reaction against what we had done. Obviously, the incipient event that did that was taking in the Shah for medical treatment, and not that was when they took over the embassy, and the rest was kind of
Right.
history. But I think but that's a good case where that spark of there's got to be a way to manage these things without sparking the nationalism in the countries that will lead to everything being harder. And again, I think we're not as effective at that in Afghanistan and Iraq. Not only not effective, we made huge, colossal mistakes in that regard also in those two countries. But I'd say we got it right in Colombia, and the other one was El Salvador. We were very cautious in El Salvador about not being too heavy-handed, never sending ground troops. We did everything indirectly, and I think figuring out that formula where we don't get too much in their face and just hand a free pass to the opponents, the insurgents or the Islamists or whoever, that they can play this nationalist card against the stooges of the Yankees. I think that's a real key thing that when we messed it up, we really messed it up colossally.
Yeah, that one certainly was a mess, and it continues to be a mess to this
Yeah,
day. Um,
yeah,
I want to give the third trivia question, and when after I give the question, I want to talk about the various administrations, the recent administrations. Starting with Reagan, which were best at this, and which were maybe not so good at this. So, the third question again, first one with the correct answer wins a copy autographed of Nation Building. Which two territories have been held the longest by the United States of America? So, which two territories have been held the longest by the United States of America? It's a little nation building on our side, and we still have them out there. Although we're kind of trying to pull Puerto Rico in, and maybe we should make the Virgin Islands a state too. Who knows? But anyway, the most recent administration, starting with Reagan, um, who handled nation building best, and not and where did the others? What made them good, and where did the others go awry, and what made them? Why they have misses? No.
yeah. I think the Reagan administration had a good record on this. They didn't, we didn't have any conflicts other than Grenada, so there was no. It was actually a fairly conflict-free 8 years, but we did a lot indirectly, and so we shored up El Salvador, which again I think was a better example of this than people sometimes realize. But it was not just military assistance; there was massive amounts of economic assistance and economic support directly to the government to shore up its budget so that its currency didn't crash. And there was that whole Caribbean Basin initiative that Kissinger ran, trying to work on tariffs and other things, not just in El Salvador, but across Central America and into the Caribbean, to give different countries a chance to build their economies and stuff. But also there was Reagan. It gets a bad rap sometimes because he was seen as this realpolitik leader that was all for right wing regimes. That nothing could be further from the truth in Central America. It was all about trying to get to moderate regimes, and there was a real drive in El Salvador to get away from the right and the left and get them into a place of a moderate government that the people would support, and it was relatively successful. I mean, it's a country that still struggles, and it had a long, long ways to go. And from the end of the conflict in the early '90s, our assistance was a little bit uneven, but I think it's a good example. I think Clinton also, I think, had a very balanced approach to these things. I think he understood that these are hard cases, that there's, he kind of inherited Somalia, and then he went on to some others that were really hard, like Haiti, but also again presided over the conflict and our involvement in the conflict in the Balkans. And I think from there it kind of got a little choppy in the Bush administration. The George Bush administration, you had kind of an administration that didn't like to do this sort of thing, so was a little uneven about it. Went from not doing it all to doing it on a large scale, and then I think Obama inherited those wars and also kind of struggled to find that right mix that would allow us to succeed. I think there was also again a bit of choppiness, but at least stayed with them and didn't abandon anything at the end.
Wow. Good summary. Good summary. Each administration brings their pluses and minuses,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the outcomes aren't what we all hoped for. We have a winner, Susan.
We have a winner, and it's none other than Mary Wadland, our publisher, and she guessed Puerto Rico and Guam as the two territories that the U.S. has held for the longest time. So congratulations, Mary! Thanks for playing. You'll get your copy.
Fabulous. Good job, Mary. I had one other question to ask you, and then I'll ask you to wrap up where you're going next and what's on the agenda for you. So you were designated as governor, I think, in Iraq when you went over to one of the provinces by the CPA. So what is it like being a governor over there? Is it similar to our governors here, or what was your role exactly? It sounds like a great role.
it it was an interesting role. Yeah, there was we kind of had a triumvirate. So there was myself as the governance coordinator from the coalition. Then there was General Swanek from the 82nd Airborne Division that had the military unit from the coalition there, and then there was Governor Barges, who was a phenomenal Iraqi patriot that we worked with. So between the three of us, we worked out all the public administration. We ran an election, tried to build security forces, but it was a very it was a tense time. But I think the thing that we found very early was that we were a small piece of a larger national narrative. And again, this was the part, I guess, if I had one lesson that comes all through the book in every single chapter, is the primacy of politics, that there has to be a national political coherence for anything else to work. So what we found in this, and it's the only pure Sunni province in Iraq, everything else is mixed, Kurd, Shia, Sunni. This is the only one that's all Sunnis. And it's a third of Iraq geographically. It's a huge province. It borders Jordan and Syria and Saudi Arabia in the south. It's a gigantic province. But, we could see that we were part of this, that we, the United States, had inserted ourselves into a political contest between these different ethnic groups, which had been held together by force and now had to work through what the new reality was going to be for their country. And so, again, this was part of the question of political coherence at the national level. So we, having inserted ourselves into that, trying to hold things together, but it was the national level decisions that were going to override that. And I left a little frustrated because I felt like we could have done it better. In retrospect, I almost believe that there were things that they simply had to work through that were going to take a decade or 2 decades to do, because they had been just so clamped down for so long, and it was just going to be a longer process. So in retrospect, I'm actually a little more patient about how it's gone. And when we talk about disasters, failures, I mean, my mantra is there is no failure in nation building. There's only incomplete successes. And I would call both Afghanistan and Iraq incomplete successes, in the sense that just because we lost interest doesn't mean they went away. Those are still countries that are trying to sort things out, and they will continue to do that with or without us. And Iraq, God bless them, they stayed together. They didn't split apart into 3 different countries like some people had the bright idea to do. They've had a horrible time. Everything's been harder than it needed to be. We were not always helpful. In fact, we were often very unhelpful. But through it all, there's still a low functioning democracy there. The three ethnic groups stayed together, and they're actually starting, I think, to cohere over time as a country. Afghanistan, of course, after we withdrew, they're in a whole different place, but they also are going to have to work through that. And it's not as simple as the Taliban now just coming in a black-white situation and being in charge. They've got a people that wants to have the things that we had offered them for 20 years, and there's plenty of people left that still have the vision of a multi-ethnic, democratic, moderate society, and that's going to have to still play out. Again, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot harder now, but that's not, again, just because we lost interest doesn't mean it went away.
Right, that's a good point. Anyway, so what's next for you, Keith? Where do you go? You have another book planned, or?
I'm the director for Latin America at the U.S. Institute of Peace. So I've been doing that for 2 years, and we're building out a Latin America program in a number of countries. Our main program right now, frankly, the thing that I work the most on is Venezuela, which is another country that I would argue is in the process of a very challenging two decades of political squabbling, leading hopefully over time to some kind of political consolidation. So again, it's gone back and forth between different visions for the country, none of which have really cohered yet. But I think that's the challenge. So we work on different pieces of that conflict, the negotiation, trying to build local peace builders. As I say in the book, all peace is local, and whatever bright ideas there are going on nationally, they've got to cohere locally. So we have a whole network of women peace builders, which is a key part of all this stuff. When women are not involved, peace usually doesn't really cohere for very long, if at all. We have youth peace builders that we support in networks, and then again, a lot of analysis and trying to work on what pieces of the negotiation in Venezuela where we can be helpful, and trying to be between the different sides and pull them together when it's possible. So very exciting work. I thoroughly enjoy it, and that's what I'll keep doing.
Good luck. Yeah, that's a big apple to take a bite from, Venezuela. That's a long road. Appreciate you coming on. It was very educational. It's opened my eyes a little bit more to nation building. I have been a fan of nation building because I believe in how our nation was built. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Terrific. Yes. Thank you so much, Keith. You really explained some pretty complex scenarios and situations in an easy to understand way, because it's very complicated issues at stake, and it was just really informative. So thanks for coming on, Ralph. Another wonderful show. Thanks for all you do, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, Michelle Goldchain, the guide to the DC metros and their history. That should be fun as well.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see you right back here on the 18th or the 16th at 7 o'clock. So thank you both, gentlemen, and you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you all for out there watching ZTV and Reading, Writing, and Ralph tonight. We enjoyed having you here playing his trivia game. We have 2 really great shows coming up tomorrow night and Thursday. Tomorrow night is a brand new show called Pup Start with Kathy Callahan. She's a certified dog trainer here in Alexandria, and she, anybody who knows her knows that she is wonderful with dogs. She has lots of videos and training tips, and just is a firm believer in living the best life, you and your dog. So please tune in tomorrow night. Lots of videos and lots of great tips to have about socializing puppies. And then Thursday night, it's Elisa Kovac of Make It Alexandria Makers Market on her show, Make It Alexandria, and she'll have David LaJulia, I believe his name is, I hope I'm not mispronouncing, from Personal Inspirations, and he's a woodworker and does just amazing creations working with wood. So that's going to be another great show. So hope to see you then right back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And until then, please remember to be the good news in someone's life.